Okay, good evening. Hope you're doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Menachos Daf Chaf Daled, and we're starting 3 lines before the wide lines on Chaf Gimel Amud Beis. There, the Gemara brings up a case, Toshma. Nisarev komtza b'shiraim shel chaversa. This was in our Mishnah from yesterday's blot, that if you have the komets of one mincha that get mixed up with the shiurim, with the shiureha of another mincha, so halacha is lo yaktir. Really, it's not ideal to be maktir that. However, ve'im hiktir also them. But if in fact you are maktir, so the halacha is that it actually counts for the bailam's chiyuv to bring that particular mincha. Says the Gemara, and it's kind of hard to do the full background here, but we'll rely on our memories from yesterday. V'hahacha, in this case, to lo have a mevatel kibatel, that really that which is falling in the mevatel is the shiureha, and the batel is the kmitza. The lo kamavat the shiraim lekomets. There's no bittul in that case. Money. Whose shita is that? Rabbanon v'chule. The Gemara doesn't even bother dialoguing because if we did this 4 times yesterday, and the Gemara says no. Really, that's not a good question, because Amar Reb Zera ne'emra haktara b'komets v'ne'emra haktara b'shiraim ma haktara ha'amura b'komets ein komets mevatel b'chavero. Just like by haktara, by the haktara of the kmitza, we don't have bittul. Af haktara ha'amura b'shiraim ein shiraim mevatel nesa komets. So then, when it comes to come over, take a seat. So then, when it comes to the haktara of the shiraim, there too ein shiraim mevatel es hakomets. Take that. Good. So that brings us to the Gemara. We're on the bottom of Chav Gimel Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom of the page. Tashma. In regards to the mitzvah of achilas matzah, what happens if you have a little bit of a mixture with the matzah and there's actually tivla, there's actually some spices that are there. Ketzach, a big discussion in the Mefarshim what ketzach is. Some Mefarshim define it as caraway seeds. Others say it's like, if you've ever seen black sesame seeds, you ever seen those? So it could be that they're hard to know exactly what it is. For our purposes, it's just basically spices. PDR. Yeah, this is where we left off last night. Weren't you in the shiur last night? No. Huh? Remote. That's right.
Fall asleep?
Nah, not stand. It is exactly where we're at. It is. So says the Gemara, Tivla bekesach b'shum shemenu v'chol minei tavlin kshera. If you have a mixture of flour for the sake of matzah, enough to have a shiur of the matzah, then the halacha is that it's kosher even if it's mixed with spices. Matzahi, the Brisa continues, it is still matzah. Ela shenikres matzah metuvelas, but it's just called spiced matzah. Now we eat lechem only, so the Maisa we try not to add anything to the mitzvahs matzah that we eat on the night of Pesach, but it still is halachically still considered to be matzah. Now, remember, we're discussing conversations of bittul. So here's what the Gemara is concerned about. Kasal kadaitach, what was the havamin of the Gemara? Da'afi shlotavlin tfei mimatzah, that the volume of the spice exceeded the volume of the matzah. So there should be bittul. So says the Gemara. Bishlam alamanda amar basar batel azlinan. Batel havikim avatel. I could understand according to that shita that we follow the batel, that which is the lesser amount. That when the matzah actually degrades, it degrades down to the same halachic level as tavlin. I could understand that shita. That's fine. 4 lines from the bottom. Elalamanda amar basar mevatel azlinon. But according to the one who says that we follow the mevatel, the majority, which in this case is the tavlin mika hava matzah, the tavlin can never morph into matzah. It's a much lower level, and it can't become that. It's not made out of flour. It's not made out of barley, rye, oat, wheat, and spelt. We know, of course, that matzah and all grain and anything that we ever bench on has to be made out of either barley, rye, oat, wheat, or spelt. Browse is the acronym to remember. And then all these discussions, how do we define bread? Do we look at the super pretzels? Is that mazonos? Is that hamotzi? Cornbread. How much flour? What kind of flour? Is it corn flour mixed with wheat flour? In which case, perhaps it is hamotzi. I asked this question at Milt's. Love their cornbread with that maple butter. You did the maple butter thing once. So that should be hamotzi. That should be how much.
So make it 51.
It's not recorded for posterity. Well, if you're eating, first of all, the bench, they're separate discussions. If it's a davar hamamid, that if it's meant to be part of it to stabilize it, that's one. I mean, you have a posting rabbi first, so you can ask him. But the Lamaisi, it's probably hamotzi, because I asked them in Mills if they have wheat flour. They said they definitely did, at least that recipe at that time, and that's hamotzi. Yeah, because corn flour enough is probably not enough. It's probably not stable enough. Oh, anyways, in that case, if you're using it as davar hamamid, even if it's not a shiur, it probably would still be a chiyuv of hamotzi. Okay, good. So it says the Gemara, I don't understand the shita that holds basar mevatel azlinan, that according to the larger amount, it should have been batel. So the Gemara says, hacha b'maya skinan, you had the case wrong. We weren't talking about a case where the majority was the tavlin. Rather, delo apish la tavlin, deruba matzah hivelo batla. Really, the majority was matzah. So the whole question falls away. It says the Gemara, dekanami, I can prove that this is true. How can I prove that this is true? Because the Ktani, what did the Brisa say? Matzahi, elashenikres matzah metuvela shmamina. It's still called matzah, which means that it was actually the majority was matzah and the minority was tavlin. Says the Gemara, Kisalik Rav Kahana. When Rav Kahana went up to Eretz Yisrael, Ashkechinhu livnei Rabbi Chia, the Yasivik Amra. He found the sons of Rabbi Chia, and they were talking and learning. And here was the question that they asked. We know, of course, that the minimum shiur for a korban mincha is an isaron of flour. We're used to hearing it, isaron, solas lemincha from Rosh Chodesh laning. The korban mincha is supposed to be an isaron. What if I split that isaron into two chunks, same total volume, but it's 50-50 now? Isaron shechilku. I took it and I split it in half. V'hinichu, turning to the top of Chav Daled Amud Aleph. V'hinichu bibisa, and it was placed in the bisa. The bisa was the name of the kli that the korban mincha was put into, and v'noga tvul yom be'echad mehen. So I have like two piles, right? I have my half isaron and half isaron. They're not touching each other. They're here, and a tvul yom, sorry, and same kli, just not touching each other. And a tvul yom. Could you get a new screen protector? What is wrong with you? The tvul yom touches only one of the two portions of the isaron, not both. So do we have a transferability to make the whole thing tameh? V'noga tvul yom be'echad man mahu. So says the Gemara, Kitnan, when we have the Mishnah says, Kli mitzarev masha besocho lekadesh, the Kli gathers everything inside of it. So says the Gemara, Hani mili, heicha de noge behadade, perhaps I'd argue that that's only when the two halves of the isaron are touching each other. Aval heicha de lo nagi behadade, but where they're not touching each other, like was the case of the Bnei Reb Chia, lo, maybe we would not say that they're mitzaref in such a case. Odil maloshna. Or perhaps does the physical contact not matter? And if the tvul yom touches one, it automatically transfers to the other because after all, they're in the same bisa. So in the same, let's get the case clear. We have the one kli, let's call it a circular kli, half isaron here, half isaron here. Tvul yom comes and touches it. Now what? Do we say that they're mitzarif because they're in the same kli, or do we need them to touch?
It's
in the same kli. It's in the same kli. But the question is, do we need them to touch? When we think of Hilchos Tuma, we would have assumed that there had to be some kind of connection between them. That would have been my starting assumption. Okay, you're right. There's a competing factor. It's all in one kli. Let's see how the Gemara responds. So it says the Gemara, Amar Lahu. Let's remember who we're talking about. Rav Kahana responds to the Bnei Reb Chia. Amar Lahu Ihu. He says to them, Mitnan kli mechaber, kli mitzaref tnan, kol dehu. And the kli is mitzaref, anything in the kli. So the tvul yom goes over and he touches one half of the isaron that's not connected to the other half of the isaron. Everything becomes puzzle. Everything becomes tameh. It's a more correct word. We're talking about a tvul yom, and it is problematic. Says the Gemara, Hoshit echad lebeinehen. Let's say that there was another portion of flour that was put there. Obviously, you can't have three halves. So I have half number one and half number two that I started with, and another half from a different korban mincha. So now I have three half isronos inside the pan, and they're not touching each other. None of them are touching each other. So now that's this case, 5-6 lines down. Hoshit echad lebeinehen mahu. Amar le. Well, it depends. Tzarich lekli, that which needs to be in the kli, which should be in the kli, which is really part A and part B, the first half of the connected korban mincha, then the kli is mitzarfo. But ein tzarich lekli, that portion of the korban mincha that doesn't really belong, it's from an external korban mincha. So then ein kli mitzarfo. So we can have this bisa, this one kli that has 3 portions in it, and if I touch one of the 2 halves that are connected to each other, it will be matame. The third one will not become tame. If I touch the third one from that other mincha, then the base 2 will not become tame, because it's not tzorech kli. It's an unbelievable bifurcation. It's like it's a little surprising. Either kli is mitzaref or kli. No, depends on it's kli mitzaref unless it's ein tzorech kli, and then it's not mitzaref at all. Very interesting.
Itself isn't a couple tongue.
It is, but he's only touching the flour. It's made out of metal.
But that's touching the metal, right?
But you didn't touch the metal.
You didn't touch it.
You touched the flour. You stuck your finger in the flour.
So that pile becomes.
We're gonna actually discuss the. We're not going to discuss the kli really. The assumption of the Gemara is that there is no tuma of the kli right now. That's a good question. Can the kli sharis become tamim? I'm sure they can. I don't know. Okay, so then the Gemara says they're not made out of cheres. That was the Gemara discussed that. We learned this. The Gemara discussed the Havamina that perhaps they were made out. We learned this in Zvachim. That we thought that perhaps it was made out of kli cheres, and I think the Gemara concluded it was not made out of cheres. Could be that you're still right. I don't know, but I don't know. Next case. Hoshit tvul yom es etzba'o beinehen. Let's say that the tvul yom places his finger in between them. So, but he didn't touch them. He just kind of put it near them, right? So it's in the avir, it's in the air. So says the Gemara, Mahu, Omar Lahu. He says, Rav Kahana says back to them, Chevra, let's not make any mistakes here. We only have one case scenario where tuma in airspace matters. We know that if you take tuma and you hang it in the airspace of a kli cheres, everything becomes tameh inside. But only there do we have such a din. It's interesting the Gemara does talk about tumas ohel. There we do have a din like that where there's no physical contact. But okay, nevertheless, that case doesn't apply. Oh, very good. Unless we really weren't talking about the kli. Yeah, that could be that it's excluding. Very good. So now, these were the questions that the Bnei Reb Chia asked Rav Kahana. Now the script flips. Hadar ihu and ba'aminayu. Now Rav Kahana, starts asking questions from them. He says, Mahu likmots mizeh al zeh. So I have my half kmitza over here, half isaron, and I have a half isaron over here. If I do a kmitza on the half isaron on the right, does it take effect on the other half to make it shirayim? They're not connected. Now, we know as it relates to tuma that kli is mitzarfo. But what about for kmitza? Does the kmitza that I do on one half affect the other half to make it shirayim? So says the Gemara, let's see. I lost my spot. Says Gemara, Tzeiruf deoraisa. When you say that the kli is mitzaref, do you mean that the kli is mitzaref mi deoraisa? Ad kedei kach. That really, halachically, it's one, and the kmitza that you take on one half has an effect on the other. Or perhaps is it only derabbanan? So what did the Bnei Reb Chia say? They're asking the right people. Reb Chia is the great early Amora. So they responded, Amru lo, the sons of Reb Chia said to Rav Kahana, Zulo shamanu. I don't know that exact case, but kayotze bo shamanu. We do have a case, Rav Kahana, that's very similar. Third of the way down, Chav Dalmanal. Ditnan. The Mishnah says, Shtei menachos, shelo nikmitzu. We have 2 korbanos mincha, no kmitza was done. Vinis arvo zubezu. So we have 2 full klei shares with mincha to the brim. They haven't been touched. They're perfect. They're ready to go. Set aside, good to go. No kmitza was done. Now, they got all mixed up. Im yochol likmotz mizu bifnei atzma umizu bifnei atzma ksheros. So what do I have? I have my flour that dumps together. It's like Venn diagrams. The rightmost section I can touch without touching the left, and the leftmost section I can grab without touching the right. Only in the middle, in the Venn diagram, is there some overlap of the flour. So says the Gemara, in such a case, if I'm able to do those kmitzas that way, ksheros, v'im lav, if I'm not able to get a clean grab of a kmitza from pan number 1 or from pan number 2, v'im lav, psulos. Says the Gemara, Ki yachol likmot miha ksheros. What's implied? Remember Rav Kahana's question to them. Hey, does the kmitza on the right side work on the left? So what does he say? Ki yachol likmot miha ksheros. If I am able to do it, so then perhaps it should be kosher. Says the Gemara, Amai. Why would that be true? Hach de me'arev halo naga. They're not touching each other. Yet it seems that it should be that way. So maybe I can extend the tzushtel, say the Bnei Reb Chia, to your question, Rav Kahana, to say that yes, in fact, if you do a kmitza on the right side, it can affect the left side. Maybe. So says the Gemara halfway down, Amar Rava, no, perhaps we're not talking about the same exact type of case. Maybe the case of the Mishnah, Amar Rava Dilma begushin hamechulakin ha'asuyin kemasrek. Maybe it's split up in a funky way where there's kind of, just look on the side on the bottom left of your page, there's a picture there. So my picture is a little different than yours. If you want to just take a look here, you can see basically the line in the middle of the flower is kind of jagged. And to shorten this just a little bit, the Gemara is giving an ukimta that our Mishnah is not your case where they're totally separated. They're interwoven. They're not exactly the same case that Rav Kahana was asking. So that's what the Gemara says. My have Allah, lamaisa, how do we paskin? Amar Rava Toshma, let's see if we can figure out from a brisa. The Tanya, the brisa says, Veherim mimenu. We know this famous pasuk from Vayikra Perek Vav, Veherim mimenu bekumtso. So the Gemara says, Mina mechubar. Yavi isaron b'shnei kelim v'yikmots. You're not allowed to have a korban mincha in two kelim to do kmitza. What's implied? Habikli echad dumya d'shnei kelim kamitz. Seemingly, if you have half of an isaron on one side of a kli and half of an isaron on another, l'chora kamitz. Seems like the question pans out that it actually. That's a very bad pun. Very bad pun. That was terrible. Someone should stop me. No? So the Gemara says that you can still do kmitza there. Amar le Abaye, he says, no, I'm not buying your argument because Dilma shnei kelim hechidami. What does it mean to kelim? Perhaps it's kigon kipiza bekab. It's Russian dolls. Maybe you have a 3/4 of a shiur container inside a whole container, and therefore they're filled. But there's, so again, maybe a smaller container like this and it's filled up, but there's a larger container around it. So when it spills over the top, they're conjoined at the tops. The flour is at the top. So what's the case of kagon kpiza bekaba? The afal gav de arive me'iloi. Even though it's true that above the rim of the inner smaller kli, the contents of the kli connect, but kevan de mifsak mechitzta de kpiza mitata. Low. That's a mistake in the Gemara. It should say low, period, without the word, just add the word low. That's what it says over here in the Aleph. If you look on the side, it says mitata low, and that is from the Shita Mekubetzes who adds that in. And that clarifies Abaye's argument is that the fact that they're all in the same kli is not always a raya. So I'm sorry, Rav. I know you wanted to try and prove your case that a kmitza on the half isaron on the right side of the pan and the left are connected. Lav dafka. Says the Gemara, 2/3 of the way down. Hakli echad dumya the base kelim hechidami. What then is the case where we have one kli that's similar to two? Says the Gemara, kigon arevas tarnagolin. It's like a trough for tarnagolin, for chickens. The afal gav demifsakan mechitzda. Hanagia, they are in fact touching. Aval hacha, in our case, to lo nagia klal tibaylach. Your question still stands. Over there, that's fine. That's two kalim in one. I got it. They're eating from a trough. There's kind of like these breaks in the middle. No problem. But don't tell me that your case, where the flour is not even touching, is comparable. So Abaye's pushback is, I hear your question. You want to know if the half isaron on the right and half isaron on the left, if I did kmitza on one, would it apply on the other? We don't have enough data. We don't have a case that's similar enough to allow for us to answer your question. Next, boy Reb Yirmiyah, seiruf kli v'chibor mayim mahu. Let's say we have two things in the kli, like we initially had. This case is not really clear in the Gemara, but we have a third piece of isaron that's outside the kli, and there's water connecting the two of them, whatever the logistics are. Kitnan, do we say kli mitzaref masha b'sochel kadesh, that a kli combines everything together and unifies it? Hani mili de gavoy, that applies only to things that are inside the kli shares. Aval divroi lo, but if there's a third thing that's outside the kli, it would not connect. O dilma kevin de mechaber Mechaber. Since it's connected, it's connected. And v'im tim tzalomar, that came in the mechaber, even if you want to say they are connected, chibor mayim v'tzeiruf kli v'nagat tvul yomi bachutz mahu. If in fact water was there, and the tvul yom touched the outside portion, can he bridge his tuma back to the inside? So says the Gemara, Kitnan, do we say Kli Mitzaref Hanimili the Noga Migavoy? Only if you touch from the inside, that's when the Tvul Yom will have an impact. Aval Mivroi Lo, but if the Tvul Yom touches the outside of the Kli, that won't transfer back in, even with the Chibur of Mayim. O Dilma Lo Shna Teku, says the Gemara, we don't know the answer to that question. So lots of variations on the theme of the two in the one pan. We don't know if the Kmitza works. That's the Gemara's conclusion. And the teku of the two in the one pan, a third half Isaron outside the pan that's connected by water, and the Tvul Yom touches it. What direction does the Tuma go in? Basically, the conclusion of this Gemara is that we don't know very much. We got the questions down, hopefully, but we don't seem to have too much in regards to the answers. 5 lines from the bottom. Says the Gemara. At the 2 dots, Chav Dalam Rav. Boy Rava, Isaron Shechilko. Let's say that you split your Isaron into 2 parts. V'nitma echad mehen v'hinichu bebisa. One of them was tamei and it was placed in the kli. V'chazar tvul yom v'naga ba'oso tamei mahu. So it was tamei already, and then a tvul yom touched it. Do we have double tuma? Says the Gemara. Amar le Abaye. Umi amri. Mi amrinan sivalo tuma olo. Do we say that when it became tummy the first time it was quote unquote satiated or perhaps saturated? It's already tummy. You can't make me tummy twice. Is that what we would say? Olo, would we say that? So says the Gemara. Amar le Abaye. Abaye says umi amrinan sivala tuma. Do we really say that you can have a saturated tuma that once it's already tamei, it can't be? Do we already say that? Because after all, and buckle up, we're getting into tumas medris now. Tumas medris is the type of tuma that people who are of a very high status of tuma, such as a zav or a zava or a nida, when they sit on something, that's called tumas medris. So says the Gemara, v'hatnan. Let's say that this is from a Mishnah in Kalim. I'm sure we all know Kalim cold. Always our favorite portions to take when we're selecting Mishnayos. Very difficult Mishnayos. V'hatnan. Sudden, let's say that there's a sheet that a person sat on. And really, because a person sat on that, it's Tamei Medras. The Gemara says that, of course, it's going to be Tamei Medras. And then you repurpose that sheet to be a curtain. The Asau Vilon. What happens to the status of the Tumas Medras on that Kli? So says the Gemara, Tahor min ha-medras. It's an unbelievable zah. You repurposed it. The Tumas Medras is now, poof, it disappears. Gone. This is what the Gemara says. Aval. Tamei maga medras. It does hold on to a lower level status of medras, which is that the zav perhaps touched it, which is true. It's not the tumas medras of I sat on it, but it's the level of tumas medras that I touched it. Fine. Amar Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says, Be'eze medras nogazeh. I don't understand. Did he touch it or did he not touch it? Ella she'im noga bo hazav tamei maga hazav. So if he touches it, then it becomes tumas medras. That's true. But kinaga bo hazav miha tame. It will in fact be tame. And says the Gemara, ve'afilu levesof. And this means that even after he sat on it, it still is going to have a secondary tuma. He sat on it already, and now we're adding another tuma. Amai, how can you add a secondary tuma? It was already tame. Says the Gemara, lema savale tuma. Elamai, says the Gemara, maybe we don't say Savale Tuma. So the Gemara says, Amar Le, Umimai dehai sheim naga bo hazav lebasar medras. We don't know the order in which these things happen. We assumed it from the brisa that was taught from the Mishnah in Kalim, but lav dafka dilma mekame medras to have a tuma chamura al tuma kala. Maybe first it was the tumas maga, which is a lower level, and then I of course agree that you can make it more tame, that for sure. You just can't do the reverse or equal, that's for sure. But perhaps it was done this way. Aval hacha, but in our case, to idi tumakala, maybe we would not say that. Maybe we would say that there is no such thing as savatuma. Ella says the Gemara, Miseifa, you're right. Let's look at the end of this brisa from Kalim. Mode Rabbi Yossi agrees. B'shnei sadinim, there are 2 sheets. Ha-mekupalan u'munachin zelzeh. There are 2 sheets that are folded, one on top of the other. And what happened? The Yoshav Zav Alehan. A Zav sits on the top sheet. He's not in contact with the bottom sheet, but he sits on the top sheet. So the halacha is Elyon Tamei Medras. The top one has a higher status of Tuma, which is that the Zav sat on that sheet. The Hatachton, the one under the top one, two separate sheets.
It's not folded. Not one.
Sheet one is folded, sheet two is folded, and they're stacked. The Zav sits on top. So this is our situation. The top one is Tumas Medras. That's my hand, my left hand. My right hand has a different status. And the bottom one is the Sha'elyon Tamei Medras, the Atachton Tamei Medras Umaga Medras. Doubles. V'amai. How could you say it's Tamei twice over? Lema Svali Tuma. Says the Gemara, that's not a good argument because Hasam Bevas Achas, Hacha B'Zachar Zeh. There, where you sat on the stack of sheets, it was one Maisa. So the one Maisa can bring about two things. But B'Zeh Achar Zeh we don't allow for stacking Tuma. That we don't allow. Just about halfway down, Mirza Hashem will get close to the bottom of the page. Omar Rava.
Meaning the bottom one would not be more tummy.
The bottom one would have a double tuma. It would have tumas medras and maga medras. The reason why we allow for that is because the maisa was a singular maisa. That's fine. But b'zeachar zeh, if it's separate incidents, then we don't allow stacking of tuma. But that bottom sheet has a double tuma. Okay, that's the Gemara's chiddush. Omar Rava. Let's talk about another case. Hold on tight. Says the Gemara, Isaron shechilko. We have our Isaron that's broken into pieces. The avad echad mehen. You lost part A of A and B. You lost part A. The hifresh acher tachtav. You replaced it with other flour. The nimtza harishon. Then you found the one that you lost. So now we have three halves, which is not normal. We have A that was lost, we found. We have replacement for A. So we have A1 and A2, and we have B. So we have three pieces. Now, all three of them are sitting in the Kli Shares for a Korban Mincha. Nitma Avud, if the one that was lost, the replacement one was lost, and if it became Tameh, Avud the Rishon Mitzdarfin, then A1 and A2 are going to be Mitzdaref. Mufrash, the replacement one, however, ein mitzdaref. Because really, the part A that you lost should have had its partner. It just got lost. So we got a replacement. But when you found the avud, so then the two original ones can be mitzdaref. The replacement one is not mitzdaref. Nitma mufrash, if the replacement one becomes tameh, so then mufrash v'rishon mitzdarfin, the mufrash and the one that was its pair, those two are mitzdaref, but avud ein mitzdarfin. In that case, the one that was lost is not a partner because it was initially lost. Nitma rishon, if the one that was never lost, the second half of the original isaron was tameh, shnehen mitzdarfin, then the other two become mitzuraf. All of them become tameh if that one becomes tameh, because that one was shaykh to the avud and shaykh to the mufrash. Good. All of this is shita number one. Abaye Omar, afilu nitma echad mehen nami, shnehen mitzdarfin. He disagrees with all of the distinctions made by Rava. If any one of them becomes tameh, all three of them become tameh. My timer. Kulu b'nei biksa tehadadininu. Everything's in the same kli. A biksa is a little house. Apparently, in modern Hebrew, that's still true that a bikta is apparently a word. I didn't know this. I learned that this morning. But apparently, this is a word that's still used in modern Hebrew. Everything's in the same kli. Abai says, stop making these. You're splitting hairs. Stop. Everything is in the same kli. It's going to become tameh. V'chein le'inyan kmitza. The same thing is true by kmitza. And we're going to do the same exact thing, not talking about an isaron, but talking about a kmitza. And then we will stop. So it says the Gemara, kamatz min ha'avud. Let's say that you did kmitza from that which was lost but then found. So shirav v'rishon ne'echalin. So then there is going to be the shiraim of the avud one and the original portion. Those will be edible. What about the mufrash? Eino necha. That's not going to be edible because the kmitza was not a matir for the mufrash. The kmitza was only a matir for that which was shaykh to the kmitza, which is the two parts that should have been together before you lost it. What if kamatz mina mufrash? What if, and this is really Rav Ashita, what if kamatz mina mufrash, the kmitza that the Kohen did was from the mufrash, from the piece that was the replacement piece? Shiur v'rishon ne'echalin, because that kmitza was a matir for those two things, but avud eno ne'echal. It was never shaykh to the avud. The mufrash and the avud are mutually exclusive. Kamatz mina rishon. What if you did the kmitza of the one that could have been shaykh to both? So then the Gemara says shneim eina ne'echalin. And here too, Abaye argues just like he did in the first case. Abaye Omar afilu kamatz em me'echad men. Even if you did the kmitza on only one of them, I don't care about which one you did. They're all going to become mutter. They're all going to become aser. Shneim eina ne'echalin. My time kulhu nami b'nei biksa dehadadin. They're all mixed up together. We're going to stop right here at Maskif La Rav Papa. Emir Hashem, tomorrow night we will pick up with shiur in person. Although I will not be there, Rabbi Handler will be there. Wishing you all a beautiful night and Mazel Tov to Rabbi and Rebbitz and Robbins.